Welcome to the Fast Mode podcast series. I'm Tara Neil, and with me today is Chuck Herrin, Field CISO at F5. F5 is a multi-cloud application security and delivery company committed to bringing a better digital world to life. F5 partners with the world's largest, most advanced organizations to secure every app on premises, in the cloud, and at the edge. The company enables businesses to continuously stay ahead of threats while delivering secure digital experiences for their customers. Chuck is a seasoned global technology and cybersecurity executive with 18 years of experience as a CISO in the financial services industry. His career is marked by successful implementations of secure digital transformations, effective governance, and the achievement of strategic business objectives. Chuck joins us today as part of our exclusive editorial segment on generative AI for network management. Welcome, Chuck. Great to have you on today's session.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Okay, so let's begin. We have heard of this very interesting term, AImateurs. I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly. So can you explain what that is?
Yes. And I don't think we have a preferred pronunciation of it yet, so we'll just go with AImateurs. But the theory here is that organizations are right now dealing with software developers and other technology professionals using AI tools to level up and increase velocity. I think that what companies haven't yet really started to address is the level of democratization that AI generating tools are going to provide, right? So people with no engineering experience are now able to create apps. And typically, actually, when a new model rolls out, this is what all the folks on YouTube do is, hey, make me a snake game, make me Tetris, make me this in Python,
Wow. Yeah.
And this is sort of a way to just prove the baseline of what's current state of the art with these new models. We need to be preparing for ubiquitous free intelligence. And so when it comes to things like software development, I've spent a long time in the enterprise space, and I guarantee that there are a lot of business analysts, product managers, people on the quote business side, not in the IT group, who are staring at long backlogs in their software development chains and in their software development organizations, things that aren't prioritized, they're not getting done, that now have the ability to bypass those bottlenecks to achieve their business goals and get their bonuses paid. And as our chief innovation officer says frequently, show me the incentive and I'll tell you the outcome. They're going to use these tools to go around the sanctioned processes for the same reason that shadow AI or shadow IT was an issue, for so long. It still is an issue. People are going to follow the incentives, and when they can get around the bottlenecks, they will. And I don't think that the governance organizations are necessarily ready for that. They're not ready for everybody to be able to create software in that way. And so this is me saying, hey guys, we really need to start thinking about this because it's happening now, and it's only going to accelerate.
And you just pointed out correctly, what the opportunities that come with this. It's like a tool that enables you to have to borrow intelligence, basically. So now continuing from that, we are intrigued to know what are the security risks that are might be introduced by AImateurs.
I think there's a number of things that defenders and people in charge of governance need to be worried about. Things like intellectual property theft that exposes your company to liability, data loss, poor security practices within the software itself. When we see things that are advertised as low code or no code platforms, for example, there's code. It's just low visibility code.
Yes.
And so in industries where you need things like software bills of materials, right, to understand what are the components that your software contains, right, that's very difficult to replicate and to prove if you have someone without coding experience doing this outside of the normal code management and governance processes. So I think the challenge is going to be blind spots and not really knowing everything that goes into this. It reminds me very much of the early days of the cloud. As a young
Mhm.
CISO, I remember vendors telling me back, in 2005, 2006, you don't
Mhm.
have to worry about that. It's in the cloud. Like,
Right.
as if the opacity was actually an
Mhm.
advantage. I still do need to worry about that very
Mhm.
much. And the fact that
Mhm.
it's opaque to me now is actually much worse from
Mhm.
a defender's perspective. I said for a CISO is 20 years. All I want to see is everything. And when you look at the complexity of the operating model that companies find themselves in today, introducing new blind spots is just making things worse.
Mhm.
So I think that's a big part of the challenge. And there's also another piece of this that I wanted to draw out from an enterprise risk management perspective. And that's with now the launch of Grok 3 yesterday. We have what, 6 frontier models?
Mhm.
That centralizing so many business processes on just a handful of companies that are very, very attractive targets to nation states and others that wish to, harm geopolitical rivals and
Mhm.
things like
Mhm.
that is a tremendous concentration of risk. And if one of those models that is generating your code for you is poisoned during training, for example,
Yep.
literally, how would you know? How would you know? You don't have the provenance for and understand like the chain of control for the training data and things. So
Mhm.
I can't necessarily point to these are the 3 things that can go wrong. We have some pretty good ideas based on what we see with attack patterns in the wild, but I think that generally speaking, the main risk area that I'm trying to accentuate here is the lack of visibility and the increase in velocity and speed. Defenders are already behind. Defenders are
Mhm.
already behind the speed of software development by the pros. And now, if we have people that are going to be bypassing the pros
Mhm.
just to get their business done, now security teams really are going to have a hard time catching up and keeping up with understanding what's happening. And
Mhm.
and when that stuff starts running in production and solving business problems,
Mhm.
things go from trial to prod really, really quickly.
Mhm.
And unwinding that as a CISO or a defender is very politically fraught, and it's very difficult to fix sort of after the fact. And I've got after the podcast, a beverage conversation, war stories from
Mhm.
previous,
Okay.
CISO roles of shadow IT costing companies hundreds
Mhm.
of
Yep.
millions, and in one
Mhm.
case, I'm
Mhm.
directly familiar with $2 billion,
Mhm.
um, where
Wow.
a group that couldn't get their priorities acted on by their central IT group, and this is one division
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
wasn't getting the resources allocated. They wound up building it themselves, largely with things like Access back in the days, Microsoft Access.
Mhm.
And when the claims started rolling in for this insurance product, they couldn't retrieve all of the documents that they needed to prove whether fraud had occurred or whether it was first party or third party fraud. And in this case, the fraud went to the borrower. The tie goes
Mhm.
to the
Mhm.
borrower.
Mhm.
So the
Mhm.
company was on the hook for paying hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in
Gosh.
claims that they
Mhm.
probably weren't actually on the hook for. But
Mhm.
because their software architecture was based on shadow IT and not built by professionals and didn't have the data, safeguards and things like that in place,
Mhm.
that company actually went out of business.
Oh, well,
That
gets
that
all
that's
of us think.
I hope that
Yep.
doesn't happen, but we've seen
Yeah.
this movie
Yeah.
before.
Yep. Yep. Gets all of us thinking, right, about how far this can go if if we don't address it with the right tools and capabilities. Okay. So now talking about that, what's the best approach to tackle AI generated code? And should organizations like block it entirely, or can it be addressed with a robust application security and visibility measures?
It's a great question. I don't I think that there's a knee jerk reaction on the behalf of a lot of security teams to just block it,
Hmm.
and you may as well stand at the beach and command the tide not to come in. It's
Yeah.
it can
Wow.
buy you some time. You can
Mhm.
ask for some grace, right? You can ask your business leaders, "Hey team, this is moving fast. We need to get our arms around this. Can you ask everybody to hold off on this for 60 days or 90 or some period of time?" But CISOs or anyone else that says, "Well, just block ChatGPT."
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
block the internet while you're at it.
Yeah.
Prohibit people from using their personal mobile devices.
All
There
right.
is no stopping this.
Yes.
We're in a global
Okay.
race condition. So I
Yeah.
do think though that there are ways that we can address this, but I think it requires thinking a little bit differently. It's kind of going back to first principles, and in some ways, it reminds me of the transition to a zero trust architecture, say from a networking and an infrastructure perspective. Don't worry about so much who wrote the code. Worry about what the code does. Who wrote it is not really material. In the same way that trust in the network perspective is not really material, trust doesn't matter anyway. Understand what the code does, understand the dependencies of the code, make sure that the code that makes it into production goes through the sanctioned process, regardless of who actually generates it. And some of that's a technology problem, some of that's a people problem, some of that's a process problem. I do think that companies that have the approach of just block it are going to have a bad time, because people are going to go around that, and you essentially lose control of it when all you say is no. Your business leaders are going to accelerate the speed of velocity. They're going to. We're in this global race condition now. Every single company is racing to implement AI. Everyone in your supply
Yep.
chain is implementing AI.
Yep.
Every enterprise, every sector, critical infrastructure, even up to the largest nation states. And in a race condition like this, slowing down, if that race condition is potentially existential, they're not going to slow down. So how do we do it and not completely throw risk management out? And I think that requires some thinking back to first principles, and not trying to force non-engineers into engineering ways of doing it, but really think about what are the controls that we need regardless of who creates this code, and refactor your processes in that way, whatever in the way that works for your business.
Brilliant. So beyond AI generated code, can you share other threats that might have become more pertinent with the widespread adoption of generative AI?
Yes. So there are some specific attack types that machine learning and LLMs are subject to that we don't have to worry about with sort of your normal web applications, right? So things like model theft, distillation, unauthorized distillation, which
Yep.
we've seen now with DeepSeek and OpenAI, and all the buzz around them. But there's also a lot of press around deep fakes and fraud,
Yep.
voice fraud, voice impersonation, the grandma I'm stuck in jail in Mexico schemes, right? I think that fooling humans using generative AI has never been easier, and the capabilities now are staggeringly good. I do worry about model poisoning from the perspective of the big frontier models. Um, those are very attractive targets to nation states. And when you think of that centralization of risk, again, if you think back to the CrowdStrike issues, and never throwing shade at another competitor, don't get me wrong, but that was one vendor issue that had widespread impact. Think of what happens when OpenAI has a denial of service condition or some production fault and goes down. And now we've got thousands of companies that are dependent on that back end being available. That's a tremendous concentration of risk in just a few companies. I think things like that are sort of top of mind. The centralization of risk, and then these novel types of attacks that we see against machine learning models. That traditional things like web application firewalls, they don't understand trying to jailbreak a model. The WAF isn't going to stop you from saying ignore previous instructions,
Yeah.
and now you're a coding assistant or whatever. Um, that's I think that it's a bit of a new area that defenders need to understand now. What are the LLM top 10, not just the web top 10 or the API top 10 or the mobile top 10 or any of the top 10s that we use. And one thing that we tend to do, I was actually talking to an analyst friend of mine today, and I'm totally stealing this from him. Every time humans get the new shiny sparkly thing, we forget about fundamentals.
True enough.
And
True
and
enough.
and here we are, like the basic controls of rate limiting, authentication, strong authorization, validating your tokens, all of these defense in depth practices that we understand for modern apps, they still apply with AI apps. They're just the most modern of modern applications. But so many organizations are rushing to sort of put it in. They're not necessarily taking the system view, the ecosystem view, and making sure that the rest of these controls, malicious user detection, these types of things are in place. They're just trying to get the model out and solve whatever business problem it is. I'm a little worried about that. Companies taking
And do
this,
you think? Yep.
not addressing it in hindsight.
All right, okay. And do you think organizations are ready for that? Are they ready to put in place, kind of controls at every point of the journey? Because the journey itself is new. When you have AI generated stuff, and you're leveraging that for all your business processes, there are going to be a lot more new processes. So do you think they're ready, or, they have some sort of idea on how to do it?
What we found, actually in the field, we work with customers all over the world. Organizations that are already proficient at running hybrid and some more multi-site apps, distributed applications, they're pretty well suited for this. These are
Okay.
just multi-distributed applications. There's really, a few key components. There's the inference, the model itself. There's the AI application. There's storage, right? And then depending on the type of AI model, whether it's retrieval augmented generation or some others, you may have data different places. But companies that already have that sort of that practice and discipline, they're going to be okay. Right? There's some new things they need to worry about, but they've got the basic muscle memory already.
All
Companies that
right,
have
okay.
never run hybrid or distributed
Yes,
applications before and they
yes.
jump straight into AI are going to have a bad time, but it's probably not because of the AI. It's because they don't know how to run distributed apps. It's because they don't have this ecosystem of controls in place
Okay.
already, and they would have a bad time if they were just running distributed apps, much less AI. AI adds a wrinkle in that these generatively powered AI applications are what we call non-deterministic, which means you send an input and you'll get send the same input three times, you'll get three different answers.
Okay.
So monitoring for what normal looks like looks different when the applications respond differently. But generally speaking, the ecosystem of controls is largely the same as other distributed apps.
So if you're going to have weaknesses or vulnerabilities, existing vulnerabilities, they're going to just basically spill over to these new processes, right?
Exactly, exactly. That was one of the
Okay.
key findings in Microsoft. They recently released a report on red teaming over 100 AI-based applications, and that take the system view into approach. And AI apps, the attackers will attack insecure components of an AI app and ignore the model altogether if it gets them to their goals. So we have to think of this at an ecosystem level, not just the model itself.
Wow, amazing. Now, looking at F5, can you tell us more about F5's solution for application delivery and control?
Yes, absolutely. So F5 is uniquely positioned here. Over the last several years, F5 made several strategic acquisitions for everything from a distributed cloud platform, which now is the number four IPv6 network by peering and the number six IPv4 network by peering in the world. The legendary Big IP for application delivery control and performance for primarily on-premises workloads. We own Nginx, which is the most popular web server and API gateway in the world. So we have all of these data planes. And what we're really good at is deep packet inspection and proxying application traffic. And because we have these capabilities for on-premises, sort of legacy apps, modern apps, whether they're distributed wherever they run, Kubernetes or in public cloud or wherever, as well as our own cloud offering, we're uniquely positioned to pull these three things together and have that ecosystem of controls that we were just talking about wherever your apps run. So you can literally expose one service in one cloud and consume it in another cloud, and that architecture goes just from that point to point with full programmability of all three data planes. We do this for companies all over the world today. And like I said, AI apps are just the most modern of modern apps. We already have the capability to secure, as we say, every app and API everywhere. And so we're very well positioned to support these. Further, because we're really good at traffic management and load balancing, we do the traffic delivery for some of the largest AI factories in the world. Now, I'll keep our customers' names confidential, but some of these that have 100,000 plus GPUs, well, it turns out you can't actually pipe in data to 100,000 GPUs all at one time. You have to do load balancing. So you have to break it down into pods of 576 GPUs at a time and then load balance across that entire array. And F5 is really good at that. We have carrier class, hardware that does load balancing for the largest, telecoms in the world and things like that. We're right in that space. So it's a really good time for F5. And our partnerships with NVIDIA and others are only really cranking it up. We're running our security stack natively now on the NVIDIA Blue fields that come with the H100s. It's a tremendous opportunity for all of us as this field continues to evolve.
Wow, amazing. So you talked about deep packet inspection capabilities as well that you guys have. So does that enable visibility down to like application layer, protocol layer, and then we have these, very strict encryption protocols, right? And does it help to, to deliver transparency into those kind of flows?
Yes, absolutely. And
Oh.
the ability to do things like orchestrate SSL connectivity across, wherever you're load balancing and routing application traffic is super important. That's exactly right.
Wow, awesome. Well, I think, yeah, we've heard a lot about generative AI and, and also AI matures and very interesting stuff indeed. So thank you, Chuck, for joining us in today's session and for sharing all these brilliant insights.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. And to everyone tuning in, thank you guys for listening. If you want to learn more, visit www.f5.com and follow us for more updates and insights as we continue to uncover the latest in technology and telecommunications. See you in our next session. Bye bye.